Hello.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I am doing great.
Yeah.
We've got one person on.
Oh, all right.
Oh, maybe two.
Cool. So how are you doing today?
I am awesome. It is a lovely day out. I am pumped to hear from folks. I've gotten lots of wonderful responses from your registrants that I'll tell you about later.
Oh, that's great. I can't wait.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so I met with a couple of hackers last night at for a happy hour to talk about their project and stuff. So that was cool. We talked for about an hour and a half at the Skylark Lounge. So
Right on.
yeah, it was cool.
That's fantastic. So I don't know if you can see the QA section or not. As a presenter, I can't remember, but I can definitely see it. So if you can, then I can certainly feed them to you.
There we go. Yeah, awesome. This is my first time using Hangouts on air, so I do see it in the sidebar on the left side. So cool.
Right on. Well, hello, three viewers who we have on here. I'm Serena from DevPost, and we also have Tony Blank from Context.io, and he's going to be chatting with you guys and answering your questions. So if you have questions, there is a little QA box to the left of your screen, which you should be able to click on and ask a question. So you can just put those right in there, and we will answer them real time. So we'll give you a couple minutes to do that. And then, Tony's been chatting with folks all over the country. He's been a very busy traveler talking about this competition and the API in general. So as we wait, I'm sure that he could potentially chat with us about, any questions that he's seeing coming up pretty regularly or things that people are having trouble with so that we can get things started. But please don't be shy. We can't wait to get all your questions answered for you.
Yeah. So first question, if you can hook up Context.io to a POP account, and unfortunately the answer is no, because the difference between POP and IMAP is the state of the email message is saved on the server side in IMAP, like if the message was read or not. And in POP, the state of the message is saved on the client side. So if you have multiple clients, which your app would be like a different client, on POP, you'd be just changing the things on the client side. It wouldn't be reflected in the other clients and stuff. So there's not much we can do with POP, unfortunately. Sorry about that. Thanks for the question, Jerry.
Tony, any sneak peeks on cool things people are building? Any general topics that are outside of what you ever would have thought of?
Well, I think we have had one team that's working on an Apple Watch app, which is cool. It's the first time anyone's actually integrated Context.io with an Apple Watch. So I thought that was pretty cool. Sure. With three-legged OAuth, so for those of you who don't know what three-legged OAuth is, it's a way where you can make calls to an API on a on a device and keep the credentials safe. So for instance, with two-legged, you get your API key and secret, and you store those on your server typically, and then you can make calls to the API. The key and secret are safe on the server. If you say we're making a browser plugin or like an Android app, you can't put that key and secret on the device because it could be hacked by someone malicious, get those credentials, and then they'd have access to all of your users' email, which is certainly not desirable. So with three-legged, The way it works is you first have to send an email to our support, that's support@context.io, and then ask for your key to be converted to a three-legged key. When it's converted to three-legged, then for every API call except create an account. The way it works is you use your key and secret that you get off the settings page to make an account for your user. In the response that comes back will be a token, and that is specific credentials just for that user. It's safe to put that on your user's phone or save it in the local storage in their browser, and then use that token to make calls. If somebody malicious happens to get that token, the only email they'll be able to access is that specific user. So it's a lot more secure. You figure if the user loses their phone, if someone malicious, they have their email account anyway, right? So, and they have to decompile it and stuff. So it's a way to keep it safe. Our support for three-legged is a little bit rough around the edges right now. So if you have a three-legged key, things like our connect tokens won't work. You'll have to make manual API calls, and I'd be happy to talk more through that if you have questions. Our interactive console only works with two-legged keys, for instance. So there's a couple of our helper tools that don't really have a good kind of concept of three-legged that we really want to make that a bit more robust in the future. But for now, three-legged is an option. An alternative way that you could work with mobile devices like making Android is if you don't want to use three-legged, another popular way is to stand up a very simple web server that you API calls through. So you could use Flask or Heroku and just make a very simple, pretty much your own API. You'd be proxying calls to Context.io through that. A lot of people like that method because it allows you to do some interesting things. On your server instance, you could cache some results. So it could be faster performance for your users than having to talk to us and maybe having to talk to the email server every single time you make a call. You could also do things like you could transform the JSON result. So for instance, say that we give you all this information back in a big JSON document about this message, but your mobile app really only wants the subject. If you proxy the calls, you could then transform the JSON and only send a really small payload to the device to keep it lean and network friendly. So that's also a popular option to keep your users safe when doing a kind of client-side activities and everything. So I hope that helps you out.
And I'm not totally sure if everyone can see the questions, so Tony, if you wouldn't mind reading them before you respond, that'd probably be super helpful.
Absolutely. Cool. Next question. Hey, Tony, our users will sign up using Office 365 Outlook accounts. Some will have forwarding set on that account to pass it off to Gmail or other providers. Will Context.io still intercept those messages, or the forwarding interrupt the flow? So honestly, I'm not super familiar with how Outlook does the forwarding. If those messages hit that account and they stay there, and what Outlook does is then make a copy and sends them on to Gmail, then yeah, that really should work. If it's doing something before it actually gets into that inbox folder, then we might not be able to see those. So that's something where I think it should be fairly simple to test. That's something that we could certainly test in the interactive console. So you wouldn't have to write any code. You could just hook up both those accounts. And what's interesting, both Outlook and Gmail were able to use OAuth to get the access to that email account. So we don't need credentials. That's one of the things that's a little bit unique about those two providers. OAuth is certainly the preferred method because the integration doesn't break if the user changes their password. So I would say I'm not totally sure, but try it in the console. And of course, certainly you can reach out to me if you have any questions or talk to our support team. We're certainly here to help out if you need anything else. Cool. So next question. All right. Thanks for explaining three-legged authentication. Next question. When I send in a request to create a new account, will I need to sign my request with my own key and secret? So does that mean I will have to store my key and secret on all mobile devices? You know, I in the past I've seen people do that on the server side, but I'm guessing you're probably using a backend where you're not planning on having your own server. I'll tell you what, let me do a little bit of research on that, because if you're trying to do everything on the client side and you're not going to be doing anything on the server side, then that's something that that will, I think we have a solution for that, but I'm just not really sure. So certainly shoot me an email. My address is tony@context.io, and I'll definitely follow up with the team and make sure that that we make sure that your users are safe and that you have a way to go about doing that.
You're doing awesome on questions, guys. What else you got for us?
Yeah.
Okay, well, while we're waiting, I will give a few tidbits around submission and what to do there, because this often catches people off guard. So this is something that everyone should be aware of and take note of. But you really should, if at all possible, try to submit early. And the reason for that is that it's really a pain in the butt if you get there and you're like, oh my gosh, there's this question that I didn't even know I had to answer, and then you miss the deadline, and it's unfortunate and everybody's very upset. So if you can submit early, you can continue to update your submission as many times as you want. You can update it 50 times before that deadline, but that way you'll definitely be all set and ready to go and not be crying over spilled milk at the end of the competition. So there's my 2 cents promo plug, and now we have another question.
Yeah, and then just to tack on to that, we love to see these early submissions. Like we're so excited to see what everyone's building, and so yeah, certainly do exactly what Serena said. That'd be awesome. Cool. So next question: what is the lifespan of a token? So I'm guessing you're asking about the three-legged tokens that we send out when you make an account, and I do not believe those expire. So that's something where they probably should at some point, and then have some mechanism to re-provision those, but we don't really have that now. Again, full disclosure, our three-legged support is not super robust, which that's why I try to encourage people to do the proxying the calls to keep credentials safe on devices. But you know, we do have the three-legged. It is what we have right now. So yeah, so the tokens don't expire. And I just noticed that my Beck poster is framed up really well in there. I don't know if anyone's a fan of Beck. I am.
It's like your friends. You're like hanging out right there. It's great.
That's actually, I'm going to grab a cup of coffee. I'll be right back in 20 seconds.
All right, guys, this gives you plenty of time to formulate your questions. It's very exciting stuff. And for anyone who has just joined us, there is a QA box in the left portion of your screen. So you should be able to ask us a question right there, and then most likely Tony will answer it for you. And if not, we will get back to you with the answer very shortly.
If you're really nice, I'll answer. You can also ask me like really any question that you want. It doesn't have to be related to the competition. I'm happy to. Oh, cool. We got one. Cool. All right. So this is a great question. I'll read it out loud. Emails are something private and people need security assurance if an app handles it. What is the recommended way to do this, or does Context.io have any recommendations? Any specific text? Do we need to show any Context.io privacy policy? Excellent question. We take privacy and security incredibly seriously. You know, I wouldn't want people poking around in my email account without my complete permission, without complete understanding of why they need access and what they're going to be doing with my email data. In a lot of app instances, that's fairly obvious, right? Like, you know, if you're signing up for an email client and you're trying to install it and it asks for your email credentials, that's a pretty obvious thing. Most people can understand why they need to do that. If your app is doing something different, like maybe, you know, maybe you're looking at contacts or something, right? There's a lot of different ways you can maybe get contacts, and an average user might not really think about the wealth of contact information that's in their email and why the app would want to use it. So the first thing that I would really encourage you to do is to really clearly communicate to your users during the sign-up process, or maybe on the marketing page or something. Find the right spot to talk a little bit about why your app needs access to their email account. We do have a number of resources that can help you out. One of the things that we do require, since currently you pay for the Context.io service with anonymous aggregate email data from your users, that certainly is something that we require that has to be communicated. Let me put a couple of links in here. The first one I'm going to share with you is it is a frequently asked questions about privacy. And I really like this because the team that we had write this, they really did, you know, I'll put this in the chat, I think. I hope everybody can see that. It's really well done. This is written in really plain language, easy for people to understand exactly what is being done with their data, what data is being used, and all the information about their privacy and stuff. So I would certainly, you could certainly share this link with your users. And also you can follow the same kind of style and language patterns that we use to just, you know, in plain English explain this is what we're doing. As far as what you have to include in your privacy policy, we do have some boilerplate language for that, and I'll put a link into that as well. Give me 1 second. This is in our terms of service, and we have just boilerplate right here under security and privacy, and I don't think that there's not an anchor tag. So it's about, I can't do a link directly to that section, but it's 18.4.3. That's the privacy requirements. Let me put this in here. And I'll just do 18.4.3 is the chapter and section that that has that boilerplate language that we require that you have included in there. So I hope that makes sense. And I'm happy to talk more about the data sharing that you agreed to do with us, and what kind of emails that we're looking for and the process behind that. In fact, would that be a good thing for me to talk about now? Is that interesting? Cool. So about 3 years ago, Context.io was bought by a company called ReturnPath. And not sure if you've heard about ReturnPath. ReturnPath has been around for about 15 years. You can think of them like an email data clearinghouse. So ReturnPath consumes all this anonymous data about email. They look at it, and then they offer products to people that send a lot of emails. So big email marketers like Starbucks and Groupon and those kinds of companies that send tons of transactional emails. They sell products for ISPs, people that are trying to fight spam. And then to both of those groups, We have email security products to be sure that the people that are subscribed to email lists stay safe. That's stopping attacks like spear phishing and these different kinds of email attacks and stuff. I'll give you one example that might be interesting to illustrate the kind of how return path fits into the email ecosystem. Let's picture you have a Comcast email account that sends an email to a Gmail account, right? And this email is allegedly from, let's just say, a bank like Bank of America, and is asking for account information. So it's a classic attack. Now, return path has relationships with Bank of America, Comcast, and Gmail. So when that email comes in, we know the whitelisted IP addresses that Bank of America sends from. We see that email is not from that. So we know that this is an attack. This is a malicious attack. So we can tell Gmail, don't deliver that message to your user. Keep your user safe. That's an attack. We can tell Comcast, hey, shut down that email account because it's sending out attacks to other people around the internet. We can tell Bank of America, hey, we're keeping your users safe. So it's a win-win. And without return path existing, then all of those companies would have to always be talking to each other, and it's unwieldy and not manageable. So that's where return path kind of fits in our missions to make the email ecosystem safe. So where the context.io data comes in, the kind of data that we get from other sources are just things like, might be Yahoo saying, we think these 800,000 messages are spam, and here's a portion of that data that we can then use mashed up with other data that we get. But it's not a really complete view of that message. With context.io, what we share, it's anonymous aggregate data around commercial emails. So what return path cares about are emails like newsletters for the customers that send those out. And what we do, we see, say an email comes in from Starbucks. We have to see that same email many, many, many times. And we essentially do a diff and throw away anything that is not consistent between everything. So what we throw away is anything that's personal information. That's PII is the abbreviation for it. I like to use acronyms because it makes me sound real smart. So PII, so that is personally identifiable information. So we throw all of that away, and that's things like you can imagine, like IP address. That's clearly something that could be used. Certainly name, last name, any kind of account numbers, frequent flyer mileage numbers, all that stuff we throw away. We even look for data points that could be combined. Like for instance, there might be something that has, say, your street name, right? Not your address, and the color of your car. Like those two data points combined could be used to identify somebody. We take really extreme measures to be sure that none of that is in there at all. So when the data comes in, we actually have a quarantine room where it's locked down, and we have a team of analytics experts that examine each stream of data that's coming in to be sure there's nothing personal in it. So anyway, we take great care to not. We don't even want to know who your users are. We just want to know if the message was in the spam folder, if it was read, those kinds of signals that we can then use to improve email overall. So happy to take more questions about that. It's the email stuff, it can be pretty complicated how it all works. So I'm happy to explain that more or answer any questions.
Thanks for explaining that, Tony. I think that's really helpful, really interesting. I didn't have any idea that it was those types of data points that you guys were looking for, so that's cool.
Yeah, well, and I'll add one more thing to it, because this is something that I actually learned. I thought was pretty fascinating. And so we can call this a brief history of spam filtering. So, the way that it used to work, like in the 90s, was solely based on like these keywords, right? So things like Viagra or something called prawn. I don't know what that is, but you know, so those are the things that ISPs filtered email on. Spammers in this spam arms race then got wise, and they said, okay, well, I have to put a bunch of language in the bottom. We've probably seen emails like that before, where it's like some open source text where it says they flood the bottom with a bunch of words that hide the word Viagra, like to the filters, so that message gets through. So after that, then in this arms race that's going on, then the move to domain-based filtering. So what that means is that they're looking at the IP address that's sending the emails on, right? So this is where actually ReturnPath invented something called sender score, and that's like a credit report for an IP address that sends email. So this is why if you've ever done any transactional email sending, you have to warm up an IP address. You have to send a small amount of messages out first, and none of those bounce back as spam or get reported as spam. And then it's like, hey, look, I'm trustworthy. This is great. You should deliver all my messages. So, and then you can slowly increase the volume and you maintain your good reputation. Then all of a sudden your messages are being delivered and they're not spam. Well, so of course, spammers learned that, oh, all we have to do is I have 1,000 IP addresses that I'm slowly warming up and sending out good messages. And when they have a good reputation, then I send 3 million messages about, herbal supplements or something. So, so that's started to not work. So now, just in the last 2 to 3 years, I'd say. So, I mean, pretty recently, right? Like in the whole email lifespan, the last couple of years is like pretty much now. It's moving to what we call subscriber-based filtering. So that is the data that Context.io is able to provide. So subscriber means what did the user do with that message? If the user read it and opened it, that's a pretty good indication that it might not be spam. If they forwarded the message to somebody else and shared it, then that's probably not spam at all, unless it's really hilarious spam, right? Because I don't know, you kind of share this with some friends. Or if they certainly flagged a message as spam or flagged it as not spam, looking at how the subscriber, the user, interacts with the messages is really the most accurate way to determine if that message has value or not. So that's the data that we share in that aggregate form. So and anyway, I just wanted to tack it onto the end. That's kind of the why of why we use this data now.
Well, my brain's full. That's great. So awesome. So during that, we got a couple more questions. Let's take the first.
Yeah. All right. Cool. So the question is, I'm storing the tokens in my database, so it needs to remain active. Okay, so that's cool. It certainly should remain active. They don't expire. Is this the second year you guys did the Context.io competition? No, this is the first time. So we're super excited to be partnering with DevPost, and Serena and her team have all been wonderful. So we're incredibly thrilled at the support that we're getting from DevPost, and I've absolutely loved talking to all of the participants. So this is something that I hope that we can do year over year, but we'll see.
Awesome. So we're about halfway through the hour, guys. So additional questions if you've got them, this is the time. Obviously, we are going to be doing this every week through the rest of the submission period. So 3 more weeks to go, which means get going on those applications and submissions and getting them in and all that good stuff. And putting your questions together for Tony, who is not only available on these Hangouts, but also via the discussion board and the support at Context.io directly. So lots of places to get help.
That's right. We're definitely here to help you out. So so if no more questions come up today, at any point in time, shoot me an email, yell at me on Twitter, just yell at me in general. It's fine. Sounds good. Well, I think my coffee's done. I'll be right back.
And Lori, we just got your question, so as soon as Tony gets back with his coffee, we will answer it post haste.
It did not brew. It's like 2 more minutes. All right, cool. When do you suggest to use message versus thread? Cool. So thread is a list of messages that that form a conversation. The thread resource only exists in our 2.0 API because it relies upon an index of email headers. So for those of you who don't know, that's the main difference between 2.0 and Lite. In 2.0, there's a sync process. So we index all the email headers, we save those on our servers, and that powers features like threading, like contacts, and things like it allows us to assign an attachment ID to attachments, which IMAP doesn't have a concept of that. So generally, it smooths out the complications of working with email data. And Light is more just a simple translation layer. So you can just speak REST, and then we translate that into Exchange or IMAP. So it's still more simple than going straight to the email server. We again smooth out a lot of those complexities, but you can do a few less things than in 2.0. So I would say if you care about those conversations, if you care about who's talking to who, or what did this message have a reply, or is this message in a conversation, then if you care about those conversations, I would use the thread resource in 2.0 then. A really common thing that people do if they're looking for that kind of thing is the thread resource, and I'm going to pull the documentation so I make sure I'm not lying to you. I don't want to do that. With the thread resource, yeah, so actually let me pull it up on this computer so I can share a link. That'd be more useful. I'm certainly an Uber nerd. I'm at my command center. I've got multiple computers. It's awesome. All right, let me find this link. So yeah, so a common thing that people do sometimes is they set up a webhook on the account. So every time a webhook comes in, then the message ID is included in the webhook. So you could take the message ID in the webhook and then do a second call to the thread resource, and then that will return the other messages that the email that just came in is in conversation with. So it really depends on what you're trying to do as to if you want to use the message or the thread resource. But commonly people do use both. So that might be a suitable answer too. Cool. So the next question is a fun one. I like this one. Share one of the most weirdest usage of context.io you've ever seen to date. So I do try to discourage like really weird uses, again, because people's email's private, so you want to be sure that everything's all in the up and up. So I'll share two stories. One, I was at a hackathon, and I think this was one in Kansas City. Was it Kansas City or San Francisco? I don't know. It all runs together. And what they did, their hack was building a green coffee bean marketplace. So this is for emerging countries like in Africa and South America that grow these coffee beans. You can imagine there's not a ton of technology down there, and it's very difficult for these farmers to get a fair market price, because they really sell to the one person that comes out to their area of the jungle, and they don't really have a lot of choices, and so they end up selling them for way under market value by people that are fairly despicable, who are taking advantage of their lack of information. So they built this entire marketplace exchange. They realized that these people, they have cell phones that have email, and they send emails a ton with their family and friends. They communicate with email a lot. It's a really prevalent way to talk to each other. These are not smartphones. They don't have laptops. They cannot interface with a website. So they built the entire marketplace to exist. The only UI to the marketplace was email. So the farmers would send a message to a certain address with a certain subject line, and that would give them back all the prices. They could then send a series of emails to update their inventory, set their own prices, see how it competes in the marketplace, and do all of that through their feature phone, their non-smartphone. So I thought that was a really interesting. I never thought to use context.io or email as essentially UX to like a website, right? Because they still have the website, because the people that were buying the beans were, people that live in Brooklyn and, those places, and then roasting them with massive beards. So So yeah, the second story actually was a little bit more nefarious. So this was an app that came out of Brazil, and this was one where we actually we saw some pretty explosive growth on their API key, which always gets us really excited. We're like, oh, awesome! We have a new app in Brazil that launched. So we reach out, and typically we reach out and say, hey, how can we help you? You know, it seems like you just launched. You're getting some traction. When we did that, and we started to look at what the app was, it was definitely spyware. It was definitely not, it didn't do anything. It didn't say to the user why it needed the email account. And like the app, what it was trying to do, like it didn't even need access to email. It was just like, it tagged that on as one of the click-throughs when you install it. And one of the click-throughs is getting access to the email. And then, so we quickly looked in the logs and saw that the first thing that this app did was started mining and stealing all of their emails. So, I mean, to what end, we have no idea. So we immediately yanked that API key, which is not a decision that we take lightly, but our loyalty is to protect the end user. So we had to make a very tough call, because if that, say, was a legitimate app and a legitimate customer, they'd be really mad at us because we just totally killed their app, and broke it. But turns out in future communication with the guy, he was had a track record, actually. Actually, what we did was we used, I don't know if you're familiar with Full Context API, but I fed his address through Full Context API. What they do is you can give them an address. It scours public social media profiles for any information on that user. All public. It doesn't do anything private or anything. But all the stuff lives out on the web anyway. So we scoured the whole web and found out that he had hundreds of complaints against other malware apps that he had done. So when we saw that, it made it very, very clear that I highly doubt that this is anything other than an attack on users. So that was one case where we did have to yank the key, but that was kind of strange. Fortunately, that doesn't happen too often. Everyone's trying to help people with email, not harm people. And I bet my coffee's done now. I'll be right back.
All right, so while Tony goes to check on his coffee, just another reminder that you can post questions here. If you think of some later, you can post in the discussion board. I will post that link once we're done here and also on the Google Plus page. So no worries there.
All right, now it's too hot. I need some ice cube. Cool, any more questions? I'd happy to answer again, talk about anything while you got me, 20 more minutes. Cool, I see a new question. All right, so do any new account I create through the API show up in my master account on my dev console? If so, what if I create millions of accounts over time? Well, we really hope you create millions of accounts over time, Jerry. That'd be awesome. Yeah, so I believe, I haven't actually, of course, logged into an API key that has millions of accounts, because I think I've only had maybe 50, at any one time. So I mean, certainly the UX on the dev console, like, you won't be able to scroll through the list of that many. So you really have to interact more with your users at that volume using the API calls. All the information that's on the right-hand pane in the console, you pretty much get all that information if you do a get on that account. So I would encourage you to do. So this endpoint right here is the list account that will list the accounts. When you have an account ID, then this instance resource of account, that one is the one that will return most of the information that's on in that sidebar. You can also query our sync resource. That has information at that bottom part, which is like last time synced and that kind of stuff. You can query that way for those things. But certainly, as you grow and you want to work with 6 or 7 figures of users, we're certainly here to help. So if there's anything that you're trying to do in the console, and if anything's problematic at that volume, then we'll certainly work with you and make sure you have everything that you need to support your customers. Cool. Next question. Is there any interface with Google Cloud messaging, especially while working with webhooks? So we don't have any kind of custom integration with that, but that would be something that you could mash up. Say like, you could accept a webhook. Lots of apps do that where they mash up many different kinds of APIs and systems. So you might take data out of a webhook and use the cloud messaging API to work with that or something. So, but we don't have any kind of custom integration on our side. This coffee tastes like donuts, so it's the best coffee. Cool. All right, next question. What kind of rules or filter can you put in the webhook? There's lots of stuff that you can filter webhooks by, and I'm just pulling up the documentation again to make sure I'm not a liar. So a webhook has 2 required parameters. These are things you have to pass when you create a new webhook. And that is a callback URL and a failure URL. Failure URL is certainly good to have. You don't really need to have an endpoint watching that. If we try to send a webhook to your callback URL and we can't do it, then we'll let you know on the failure URL. So a lot of times, if you want to build a really robust system, you might even have that on a different hosting provider. So that might be something where if Amazon goes down, you have it on Rackspace or something. So as far as the other things that you can filter, if you do not put any optional filters, it'll fire a webhook every single time an email comes into that email account. But there's all kinds of things you can filter from. You can filter from the senders or the recipients, only fire an email, only fire a webhook from this one sender. You can filter it based on the subject line. So only send a webhook if the subject line has the word coupon or deal in it. And you can actually use a regular expression in there too, so it doesn't have to match exactly. If you go with regular expressions, which I'm pretty bad. I'm really slow working with them. It's like my kryptonite. Yeah, that's just a bunch. I'll put a link to the docs, and you can take a look. Really, since we maintain that list of headers, you can filter really based on all those email headers. So that's the webhook. That's for our 2.0 API. In Lite, it's I think there's a couple of fewer things that you can filter on. And also in that doc, there's good information on the structure of the JSON document that we send in that webhook body. And also there's the way that you can authenticate the webhooks to be sure that they're coming from us, right? Because if you have this endpoint that's sitting out there in your app, and your app does something every time there's a post to it, it's possible somebody could reverse engineer your client or something, or sniff out that endpoint, see that it's accepting posts, and try to send dummy data in that could show up in your users' apps or do stuff that's malicious. So highly encourage you to follow the instructions that are at the bottom of that webhook, that page. It tells you how to validate each webhook and confirm that it's coming from us. Cool. I've been seeing an endpoint for sync. Can you please explain the usage? Won't the account sync periodically or as email arrives? Yes. So the sync, we only have a concept of that in our 2.0 API because Lite doesn't have an index. There's nothing to sync in Lite. The way that syncing works is every time you make an API call, if we have not triggered a sync in the last, I believe it's 3 minutes, then we fire a new sync off. So what that means is the behavior you might see if your app has made a call to that email account in a period of time, say it's been a week since the user logs in, and your app doesn't do anything unless they log in. That's the first time that they log in. Then it's the first time they make an API call. Then, right? So there might be a week's worth of emails, and let's say the first thing that your app does is get the 10 most recent messages, right? The behavior that you will probably see is, if it goes for a week, the first list message call will actually give you old, outdated information. It won't have the new messages that are in there. Since that call, we want to just give you the data back right away. So we would give you back the 10 most recent messages that have been synced, that the API is like aware of. And then if you say maybe make a call 10 seconds later, and it's the same one giving the 10 most recent messages, that first call probably, well, it would trigger a sync. If there hasn't been one longer than 3 minutes, if it's been a week, we'll trigger a sync. And then the second call will then be updated. And you can imagine if there's a lot of stuff that you're doing, that generally keeps the index up to date. As far as best practices go, that's something where that's why that sync resource exists. You can do a get on that and get the timestamp of the last time that a sync call was made. So that's something where you might be able to do that as a first action and say, has this account been synced recently? If so, awesome. If not, then trigger a sync. So your app might have different thresholds. Maybe you don't need super fresh data all the time. I think most people do, but your app might not. So maybe if you always do, maybe the thing that you always do is warm up the account with the post to that sync, get that sync process started, and then it'll be up to date and fresh. One other thing that's a little bit tricky and can be confusing is how webhooks fire in 2.0. So I guess I'll do a kind of a brief explanation because we have 12 minutes left. I want to be sure there's time to answer all of your other questions. But the way that it works is when we see a new message come into an email account, in 2.0, we trigger a sync because the API has to have those headers synced in order to know anything about that email. So we trigger a sync. The sync happens. When the sync is complete, then we fire the webhook off. Typically, that takes under 10 seconds. Occasionally, those sync workers can get bogged down, so that's where you can see some temporary delays in those webhooks. Another thing that can actually happen, especially during testing, when you're testing a webhook feature, you send an email to your test account. You see the webhook come back. You maybe make a very quick code change, and maybe 15 seconds later, you send an email again. You want to see that response back, and you're working that way. I know that I tend to iterate like a ton, right? Okay, let me just see if I'm running a log message. Cool. Now let's do something with the data. Cool. Now let's do something else. So it's like I rapidly iterate stuff, mainly because I'm not that great of a programmer. So anyway, so if that happens, then we don't always do a sync, because if we do a sync, say every 10 seconds, we're always doing syncs, we'll get throttled by the email server, and we lose access to it. And that happens for a period of maybe 4 hours. We'll lose access while we're temporarily throttled. So the way that it works is if we see an email come in, we'll do a sync, we'll fire the webhook. We see an email come in rapidly after that, we'll probably sync that second one, do a sync right away and fire that off. If we see a third one, maybe half the time, 50% will do a sync. We see a fourth one, so we won't fire a webhook, won't do a sync. Fourth one comes in, we do a sync, you get 2 webhooks. So you'll get everything eventually, but we have to do that slowdown so we don't get throttled by the email servers. So that's something where we've gotten a number of support tickets in the past saying, hey, webhooks are broken. I've sent 3 messages in a row and I've only got 1 webhook, and then I send a 4th one and I get the rest of the 3. It's like, yeah, that looks like it might be a bug. It's our way of trying to make sure that you get all the data that like eventually, and we don't get shut down by the email servers. So it's kind of a tricky balance, but that's a little caveat with syncing that might be useful. Cool. So trying to download a message attachment from the developer console, and the request and response appears to be empty. Is it possible to do that? To download an attachment from the console, I wouldn't really recommend doing that from the console. Let me log in real quick and just check it out, because I I don't think I've tried to do that before, but it might be fun to see. Let's see if we can do that. Yeah, I've only downloaded stuff from the, like using code. One thing that you could actually do from the console is, let's see, let me go down to files. There they are. So, yeah, I keep doing this on my other computer, so I can't share links. Let me do this here. If you look at the content resource, which is a sub-resource of files, and there's this get, which I think this is probably what you're trying to do, download a given file. Let me put this in the chat. There we go. So if you see, I don't believe that you are, I don't believe that you're able to actually download the file on the console, but what you could probably do is there's an optional parameter as link, and I'll put that in the chat as well so you can see what that is. If you pass that, what we will do is we will push the contents of that file to an S3 bucket that is publicly available and give you a link to it. So certainly, oh, and the link expires after 2 minutes. So it's kind of security through obfuscation, right? Through obscurity. But on the console, I believe that you're able to, you're able to pass in that as link. You just set it to 1, and then in the response, you'll get a link that is a link to that file. So that's something on the console. If you just want to test it out and play around, be sure that you're getting the right file. You can do that and do as link 1, and then get the link, copy that link, paste it into your browser, and you should download the file from the S3 bucket. And of course, you can do that using the client libraries and do that in code as well. But you probably will just want to fetch the content anyway. So that's how that works. Cool. And next question. Donut coffee. On creating a new account, how many messages will be indexed till the time of email creation? Yes. In 2.0, when you link up the account, we trigger a sync. Sync starts at present time, and it goes back until there's no more messages. So that could take a couple of minutes if you have, say, 20 or 30,000 messages. There's some accounts that have 250,000, 300,000 messages. Sometimes with, I know that someone was having issues syncing an email they use for support, and part of the support emails they get would be images attached to it. So this was an email account that had, I think, 500,000 messages in it, and lots of those messages had like 1 or 2 meg images attached to it. So, in email, an attachment is just another mind body part, right? It comes through as plain text. So in order to index that, we'd have to download, each message was 2 to 3 megs. We'd have to do that, and to do that 500,000 times. That sync process took, I think, maybe 8 hours or something like that. It was something crazy. While that initial sync is going on, you can still make calls to the API. Just like if you say trigger the sync and do a list message call, we'll only have synced maybe the first 1,000 messages at that point. So if you say do a reverse order, give me the oldest message in there, we'll give you data back, but it'll just be up to the point that we've already synced. I mention that because that's a pretty good way if you want to start servicing up data in your app to show your users right after they sign up. You don't have to wait until the total sync is finished. You could sign up and then link up the account and then start showing that data. In the message list response and a lot of different parts of the API where we talk about messages, we give a timestamp that is last time synced. So you could use that. Maybe the last message that you showed your users, just save that last timestamp synced, and then your next list, like the next call that you can do, you can filter it to have it start at that time. So you could say maybe fetch 5 minutes worth of emails, and then 5 minutes later you can then start here and then do that. So that's a really good technique as we're building that index that you can show information to your users.
All right, you guys, we have 4 minutes left. It's like the countdown right now. So any other questions that you have, throw them up there, or wait till next time.
Let's see. You know, I really like Google Hangouts. They're just really one of my favorite things.
Tony, don't let your cat see you. It's gonna go crazy.
Speaking of my cat, I can't even take myself seriously. How do I turn this? Wait, can I just do that? I think it's on my face forever now. Yeah, I look great.
That's pretty awesome.
No. So I totally don't know how to remove my cat face now. No. Cool.
All right, we're going with the cat.
We're going with the cat face.
3 minutes. Cat face. I like it.
Yeah, it's strong that. Anyway, yeah, my cat won fattest cat in Denver at the county fair.
Wait, really?
Last Friday. Yeah. It's
that's fantastic.
Yeah, in fact, here I'll be right back.
For anyone who's still watching, you're about to get a special treat about cats. I do see another question from McKean. I'm going to go ahead and answer that for you real quick. McKean is asking if we've started reviewing submissions yet. We do have a few submissions in, and we're going to be reviewing them starting within the next week or so. So if we have questions about your entry, we will reach out to you directly prior to the deadline to get those answered. If you don't hear anything from us, expect that it is good news. But if you have any specific questions about that, we can certainly answer them on the discussion board, or you can email support@devpost.com.
Yeah, and like I said, I can't take myself seriously. I'm sorry, I don't know how to take the cat face off. But we absolutely. Oh, here we go. I think I can remove all effects. There we go. I'm not a cat anymore. Yeah, we love to see the submissions come in, and the sooner that we know about it, then the sooner we can make sure that it's valid. You can certainly ask us questions about it. Too, and we can help them out with it. This is my fat cat's Blue Ribbon. He won at the fair for being 24 pounds.
Well, I couldn't actually hear that part, Tony. I don't know if everyone else could or not. Hopefully they could. Okay. But in the rare case that we've lost Tony's audio, what perfect timing, because we're about at the end of our hour. So we really appreciate everyone stopping into these office hours. Like I said, we're going to be hosting them every week, slightly different times. So do check out the competition website for those times, and we'll certainly email you guys as well with that. And like Tony said before, any questions, you can hit him up via email or Twitter. You can post on the discussion board. You can write into support@devpost.com, and we will get your questions answered for you. And we are super pumped. We can't wait to see what you guys build with this awesome API.
Yeah, super excited. Can everybody hear me now?
I still can't hear him. I don't know if you guys can or not. So
yeah, just want to thank everybody for coming out.
I'm going to take his thumbs up, which is coming momentarily, as a yay, everything is awesome. And we are going to talk to you guys later. We'll be ending the broadcast. Shoot your questions over to us as they come up, and we'll see you next week.